Good afternoon and welcome to the stadium meeting of April 27, 2023. I'm Majority Leader Keith Powers. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. If you'd like to follow along, the agenda for today's meeting is posted on the website.
Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Roll call.
Abreu. Ariola. Thank you. Aviles.
Presente.
Ayala.
Here.
Barron. Botcher.
Here.
Brannan.
Here.
Brewer.
Yes.
Brooks Powers.
Present.
Caban. Carr. Della Rosa.
Here.
Dinowitz.
Present.
Farias.
Present.
Felice. Gennaro. Gutierrez.
Here.
Felice. Hanif.
Here.
Hanks.
Present.
Holden.
Here.
Hudson.
Here.
Joseph.
Here.
Kagan.
Present.
Krishnan.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lewis.
Present.
Marte.
Present.
Mealy.
Present.
Menon.
Present.
Carr. Moya.
Present.
Narcisse.
Present.
Nurse. Osei. Palladino. Ariola. Wrestler.
Here.
Richardson Jordan.
Present.
Riley. Rivera.
Present.
Salamanca. Sanchez.
Present.
Schulman.
Here.
Stevens.
Here.
Ung.
Present.
Velasquez.
Here.
Vernikoff. Williams.
Here.
Juan. Yeager. Borelli. Powers.
Let's go, Knicks. I am here.
Speaker Adams.
Ditto what he said, I'm here too.
Thank you. We're now going to have today's invocation. which will be delivered by Rabbi Yaakov Lehrfield of Young Israel of Staten Island, located at 835 Forest Hill Road in Staten Island. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. To the Almighty, Master of the universe, we invoke thy blessings upon this august assemblage of people, the City Council of New York. We gather this afternoon, dignitaries, elected officials, citizens of our great country and beloved city of New York. Imbue us with wisdom and understanding, with a warm spirit of harmony. Inspire us to labor zealously for the fulfillment of economic and political democracy. Please grant us thy guidance for all who live under our flag, the Stars and Stripes of America, regardless of race, color, religion, or creed. The Almighty sustains the living with unending kindness. He supports all who stumble and fall. He heals the sick. We pay tribute to all our elected officials. Our country, state, and beloved city need wise, sagacious, and bold leadership. This room is filled with the people that have the capacity to lead and effect change. We have put our trust in you. It is a privilege to stand before you today. May God change. We have put our trust in you. It is a privilege to stand before you today. May God grant the citizens of this great country, all of our servicemen in uniform, especially those serving in harm's way, health and happiness. May we be blessed with peace, prosperity, generosity of spirit for many years to come, and let us all say, amen.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask Councilmember David Carr to spread the invocation on the record.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I'm very proud to have my friend and Staten Island's own Rabbi Yaakov Lehrfield here with us today, giving the invocation for today's stated meeting. Rabbi Lehrfield is a learned man and actually began studying at the University of Miami at the early age of 16, going on to earn a master's degree in education and Jewish letters from the Itri School in Jerusalem, where he learned directly under Rav Belzal Nolti, then Chief Rabbi of Jerusalem, and continuing his studies at Mira Yeshiva. He received his rabbinical ordination from Rav Zolti in 1984 and from Rav Reuven Feinstein at the Rosh Yeshiva of Staten Island in 2001. He received his doctorate in Jewish law from the High Court of Jerusalem, and Rabbi Lehrfield's career of transmitting Torah began at the age of 25, first as a professor of jurisprudence at Yeshiva's Bais Yisrael in Jerusalem. He returned to New York City and has been the senior rabbi at Young Israel of Staten Island in the center of my district for the past 22 years, where he's been a committed and energetic faith leader in our borough ever since. In the time that he has been there, he has been a leading voice not only for Young Israel, but the entire Jewish community of the borough at which he is at the heart. And he has forged enduring bonds between different faith communities on Staten Island. His lessons and speeches and teachings have inspired generations of borough residents, including many Gentiles like myself, and my elected colleagues and I are very fortunate to have been welcomed by him as we took office and to have him as such a wonderful partner and spiritual guide. Thank you, Rabbi Lehrfield, for being here today. God bless you. Thank you. And I'm very privileged to move to spread the invocation in full on the record.
Thank you to Councilmember Carr. We'll now have the adoption of the minutes by Councilmember Lynn Schulman.
I make a motion that the minutes of the stated meeting of March 16th, 2023 be adopted as printed.
Thank you. We're going to have messages and papers from the mayor.
None.
Communication from city, county, and borough offices.
None.
Petitions and communications.
None.
Land use call-ups.
None.
We'll now have communication from Speaker Adrian Adams.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader, and good afternoon, everyone. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the presence in our chambers today as someone who is very near and dear to this council, someone who has served this council, and someone who continues to give of herself in service. That is none other than our very own former council member, Annette Robinson.
She left.
All right. Now, before we begin, I want to take a moment to remember the lives of New Yorkers who died on the job these past few weeks. We're mourning the death of Willis Moore, the longtime manager of the parking garage in Lower Manhattan, very close to this building, who died during the garage collapse earlier this month. We're also mourning the loss of a 36-year-old state DOT contractor who was killed in Queens on Tuesday after being hit by a car while working on a wall inspection. Our hearts are with their loved ones and their communities during this very difficult time. These tragedies come as we approach Workers' Memorial Month on April 28th and Building Safety Month, which is observed every May to raise awareness about the importance of workplace safety. It's a reminder of the need to enact stronger protections to ensure that our workers are safe while on the job. Yesterday, the mayor released his fiscal year 2024 executive budget. The council has been pretty clear that our priority is ensuring that the budget delivers investments in the essential services that New Yorkers need to recover and succeed in our city. While there were some adjustments to the most recent PEG proposed by the administration, the executive budget still includes another PEG totaling $1.6 billion in proposed cuts and maintains all other previously enacted and proposed PEGs that total more than $4 billion over fiscal year 23 and 24. Our libraries, CUNY, and other essential agencies and services that New Yorkers rely on are still facing significant cuts that are harmful. Chronic understaffing and inadequate resources at city agencies have already made it difficult for them to fulfill their obligations to deliver critical services and programs. As a result, New Yorkers are not getting the help they need, whether it's food assistance, housing vouchers, or other important services. New Yorkers, especially our working families, are already stretched thin as they face a crisis of affordability in this city. As a government, it is our responsibility to deliver, and we cannot afford to fail them at this critical time. New Yorkers need smart investments in key services that will set them and our city up for success. For example, earlier this week, I was joined by Mental Health Committee Chair Linda Lee, Majority Leader Keith Powers, Council Member Eric Bottcher, and mental health advocates and service providers to release our mental health roadmap. This detailed plan that focuses on strengthening our mental health care infrastructure and services with evidence-based solutions contains the type of investments that the city must prioritize. We're facing a mental health crisis, and if we do not take meaningful steps to meet this need, our city will fall short for New Yorkers. This is just one example when we talk about essential services that we must prioritize for investment, and the council is fighting to deliver. As we continue to negotiate the city budget, we will be guided by these priorities to invest in the people of our city and for their needs. Over the weekend, we celebrated Earth Day, which serves as an important call to action, to act with urgency to protect our planet. During our last stated meeting, we passed several bills to reduce pollution and support renewable energy, which are meaningful steps in the fight against climate change. I hope all New Yorkers had a great and active Earth Day. April 27th was also Eid al-Fitr, which marks the end of the blessed month of Ramadan for our Muslim communities. Earlier this week, the council held a moving Eid celebration right here in the chambers, and I want to thank council members Shahana Hanif, Alexa Aviles, Tiffany Caban, Amanda Farias, Sandy Nurse, Althea Stevens, and Natasha Williams for co-hosting the event. To the nearly 1 million New Yorkers who make our diverse city stronger, Eid Mubarak. Today is Delta Day at City Hall, so I want to welcome all of the Sisters of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated to the People's House. We do have 2 Deltas proudly serving in the New York City Council, Majority Whip Sylvina Brooks Powers and Councilmember Natasha Williams. We appreciate everything they do for our communities through scholarship, service, and social action. Wednesday marked Israel's 75th Independence Day. I want to wish our Jewish community a festive Yom HaAtzmaut. Yesterday was Denim Day, a day committed to supporting survivors of sexual violence and increasing public awareness about this important issue. Denim Day was started in the aftermath of a rape trial in Italy, where the survivor was blamed because of the jeans she wore. It's a day of action, where we show our collective solidarity for survivors around the world and recommit to supporting survivors with the trauma-informed care and recovery they need. And all week long, we're celebrating National Library Week. Our libraries are a vital resource hub and neighborhood centers that provide critical programs and services. They enrich residents of all ages and backgrounds, and they are key to safe and healthy communities. As we continue to advocate for funding for our library systems, I want to thank the New York Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, and my very own Queens Public Library, for which I served as a trustee. Thank you for everything you do to support New Yorkers. As we enter the month of May, I want to recognize several upcoming holidays and notable days. May 1st is May Day, also known as International Labor Day, in honor of the workers who run our city and made it what it is today. We will continue to support our workers and union partners in the movement. May 2nd is National Teacher Day, observed on the first Tuesday of May. On this day, we pay tribute to our teachers who keep our students educated, safe, and healthy. Thank you to all of the dedicated and hardworking teachers who are truly our unsung heroes. May 5th, of course, is Cinco de Mayo. We celebrate our Mexican communities here in New York City and across the country. May 6th is National Nurses Day. We are so grateful to our essential frontline healthcare workers who keep our communities healthy and safe every day, and we continue their fight with them for parity. And throughout the month of May, we're celebrating Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, Haitian Heritage Month, Jewish Heritage Month, Lupus Awareness Month, and Maternal Mental Health Month. It's a big month. I also want to take a moment to plug our ongoing NYC government hiring halls that we've been hosting in partnership with the administration to recruit New Yorkers to fill vacancies in our various city agencies. We recently held a hiring event in the Bronx in Councilmember Sanchez's district, and there is an upcoming hiring event tomorrow at York College in Southeast Queens, where Councilmember Natasha Williams and I serve that college. I urge all New Yorkers looking for opportunities to join the city's workforce to stop by and join us. Finally, please join me in wishing a very happy birthday to Council members Mercedes Narcisse, Christopher Marte, and Kalman Yeager. And a very happy early birthday to Council member Jim Gennaro. Now let's move on to our stated agenda. First, we will vote on the following finance items: a transparency resolution approving new designations and changes of certain organizations receiving funding in the expense budget, a preconceived resolution to authorize an Article 11 exemption for one building in Washington Heights in Councilmember Abreu's district, five preconsidered resolutions to authorize one new Article 11 exemption and amend 4 prior Article 11 exemptions for 4 buildings in East Harlem in Deputy Speaker Ayala's district, a preconsidered resolution to authorize an Article 11 exemption for one building in West Harlem in Councilmember Richardson Jordan's district, and a preconsidered resolution to authorize an Article 11 exemption for one building in the Upper West Side in Councilmember Brewer's district. Next, we'll vote on the following land use items: 25 through 46 Far Rockaway Boulevard rezoning will facilitate the construction of a new mixed-use building and approximately 26 housing units. The council is modifying the application to change the proposed R6B district to an R5D district and remove an existing school from the rezoning area to better reflect the surrounding community character. The council is voting on a motion to file the text amendment, which was withdrawn by the applicant in Majority Whip Sylvina Brooks Powers District. 245-06 South Conduit Avenue Commercial Overlay, an application to bring an existing tire shop into conformance with zoning, also in Majority Whip Brooks Powers District. Next, we will vote on the following pieces of legislation. Resolution 487, sponsored by Councilmember Ina Vernikov, would recognize April 29th as End You Hatred Day annually in the city of New York. We thank our staff, Christy Dwyer. Resolution 460, sponsored by Councilmember Amanda Farias, would call on the state legislature and the governor to fully fund the MTA in the 2024 budget so that riders have effective, affordable, and frequent public transportation, and to ensure the MTA maintains fiscal stability. We thank our staff member Samuel Breitbart. Next, we will vote on a package of bills aimed at improving government efficiency and eliminating outdated entities. Resolution 566, sponsored by our Governmental Operations Chair, Councilmember Sandra Ung, approves the report and Advisory Board Review Commission's determination recommending the waiver of 8 reporting requirements that was communicated to the City Council on January 24, 2023. Introduction 984A, sponsored by Councilmember Gail Brewer, would repeal certain outdated and unnecessary provisions, temporary programs and pilot programs, and unconstitutional provisions from the Administrative Code of the City of New York. Introduction 986A, sponsored by Councilmember Amanda Farias, would repeal certain outdated and unnecessary advisory boards, task forces, and commissions from both the City Charter and the Administrative Code. And Introduction 1004A, sponsored by Councilmember Natasha Williams, would repeal certain reporting requirements selected for waiver by the Commission and amend certain outdated and unnecessary reports and studies. We thank our staff members Michelle Lee, Jesse Fung, Chris Pepe, and Malcolm Butehorn. Next, Introduction 891, sponsored by Councilmember Rafael Salamanca, would allow gaming for charitable purposes at professional sporting venues. This bill would authorize sports venues to conduct raffles during professional and collegiate sporting competitions from 2 hours before the beginning of play until the end of play. Venues like Yankee Stadium and Citi Field would be able to host gaming when operated by an authorized charitable organization. Thank you to our staff members Austin Malone, Natalie Meltzer, and Sarah Swain. Next, Introduction 190A, sponsored by Public Advocate Jumani Williams, would recognize the Department of Homeless Services to create a Bill of Rights that inform individuals experiencing homelessness of the rights and services available to them. DHS would have to make this information publicly available on its website, in shelters, and in social service officers. Thank you to our staff member, Aminta Kilawan. And Introduction 704A, sponsored by Councilmember Shauna Abreu, would provide landlords with the option to receive rental assistance payments like city FEPS via an electronic transfer to their bank accounts. We thank once again our staff member, Aminta Kilawan, for her hard work. Next, Introduction 273B, sponsored by Councilmember Mercedes Narcisse, would require NYPD officers to be trained to recognize and respond to individuals with autism spectrum disorder. The training would be incorporated as part of a new Recruits Academy process, and all uniformed members would receive the training on a biannual basis. Thank you to staff members Josh Kingsley and Jeremy Whiteman. And finally, we'll be voting on a package of critical street safety bills. While traffic fatalities have fallen sharply over recent decades, the overall increase in traffic violence since 2018 has been concerning, particularly in the increase of children killed on our streets. This year alone, we have already lost 41 people to traffic-related fatalities, which are preventable tragedies. Behind every crash is a family and a community impacted by this violence, and it's important that the Council advance equitable policies like the legislation we're voting on today to ensure that all New Yorkers can live, work, and commute on safer streets. Introduction 805A, sponsored by Public Advocate Jumani Williams, would accelerate and modify the study and reporting of traffic violence incidents as required by local law. It will require the comprehensive study that DOT is required to conduct after all traffic crashes involving a pedestrian fatality or serious injury take place every 4 years instead of every 5 years. DOT will now be required to submit the study to every community board. In addition, the legislation will require that the reports that DOT produces every 3 months on serious vehicular crashes now be submitted to the Speaker and all community boards as well. Introduction 679A, sponsored by Councilmember Rita Joseph, would require the installation of traffic calming devices to safely slow or reduce traffic in senior pedestrian zones, which are areas that DOT, in consultation with DFTA, has determined to be especially dangerous for senior pedestrians. Each year, the Department of Transportation will evaluate each senior pedestrian zone for the installation of traffic calming devices and install at least one in each senior pedestrian zone and at least 50 across all senior pedestrian zones. And finally, Introduction 854A, sponsored by Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Chair Majority Whip Sylvina Brooks Powers, would require DOT to implement daylighting at no less than 100 intersections per year, beginning in 2025. Daylighting prevents vehicles from occupying certain areas near an intersection as a way to expand sight lines for approaching motorists and all road users. DOT will also be required, whenever certain criteria are met, to install daylighting barriers, such as bollards, bike racks, and other physical infrastructure to prevent vehicles from occupying those areas which have undergone daylighting. We thank our staff member, Samuel Breitbart, and I believe that our former council member, Annette Robinson, is back in chambers. We will give her her due as we salute her and welcome her back to her house, the People's House council member. Thank you for your attention, and now I turn it back into the hands of our Majority Leader.
Thank you, Speaker Adams. And now we'll move into the discussion of general orders. We'll first hear from Councilmember Narcisse.
Today is very important, and before I get to the bill today, let me be clear. I'm not asking police to get a call to interact with autism spectrum disorder. Because there is words going around that we want police. There is no way. We want to eradicate that police to deal and interact with folks with autism spectrum disorder. Let's be clear. I'm a nurse for over 30 years, and I have my Tamek in the balcony telling me that they need this because the police is a first responder. But if they don't have the knowledge that required to deal with young folks and young men, young women with autism, they don't know. So once you're educated, from being a nurse is education. You need to educate. You need to power people with knowledge. And then you can have a stand. Let's say for argument's sake, we're in court. So if the person never had knowledge, they never been trained, they can tell you they did not see this sign. That's what this bill is about. It's protecting, saving one life at a time. That's what we here, to educate and preventing from both sides to interact and have escalation in any front. So when we lead with kindness and compassion, our city moves in the right direction. Today, with the passing of the Intro 273, we are doing just that. There are more than 300,000 New Yorkers are on autism spectrum, and the number of New Yorkers with autism spectrum disorder is on the rise. This increase will ultimately lead to more interaction between the NYPD and New Yorkers with ASD. New Yorkers with ASD have unique needs. At times, their behavior and mannerism can be misinterpreted by police officers as an act of aggression. This bill will fully train our police force on how best to approach and engage with people with autism spectrum. This will lead to a safer outcome for all parties involved. This interaction will have to stop, and they have to understand. I don't need police to call, but when the call is made, is who police officer will respond. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you to my safety chair, Hanks, and all my colleagues who vote on this bill, and Millie as well, CM Millie. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Now hear from Councilmember Hanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Majority Leader. Thank you so much, Speaker Adams. So I want to reiterate the comments of my colleague, Councilmember Narcisse, who's the sponsor of this bill, and I as the prime co-sponsor. But my story is a little different. Shane Quinn is 16 years of age. He's 5'10", he's 260 pounds, and he is a black man. His father, my cousin, was driving Shane home when he had an episode, attacking his dad from the back seat of the vehicle. Two police officers saw the jumping around and the commotion in the back seat and him trying to get to the front seat and approached the car with their hands on their weapons. All my cousin, this dad, can do was scream from the window was that his son was a nonverbal autistic and he was simply having an episode. He screamed the name of everybody he knew, my name, the inspector's name. And the fear that my cousin had at this moment is the inspiration and reason I co-prime this bill. As you all may know, autism diagnosis rates are increasing. This trend is observed all across our city. As a council member with loved ones, acquaintances, and community members who are autistic New Yorkers, I consider it essential to prioritize their protection and well-being. To this end, I am proud to co-sponsor Intro 273 with my colleagues Narcisse and Mealy, a bill that will equip the NYPD with training tools to ensure the safety and respect of autistic New Yorkers and the police officers alike. And I'm optimistic that the City's Council passage of this legislation and the positive impact it'll have on this community. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you. Every year, far too many New Yorkers are victimized by preventable traffic violence. Today, we will vote on my legislation, Introduction 854A. This bill will require the Department of Transportation to daylight more than 100 intersections a year across the city, as well as study the benefits of daylighting for public safety. The council is committed to improving street safety infrastructure and enforcement citywide and to helping realize Vision Zero in New York City. Daylighting is a proven safety measure that expands sight lines at intersections where traffic violence often takes place. These bills are a part of a long-term project of this council to improve street safety. I thank my colleagues for their participation, or for their partnership on this crucial issue and look forward to seeing these bills become law. I also want to discuss the two land use proposals up for vote today, both of which concern projects in my district. I support both projects and want to note that the developer for the project located at 2546 Rockaway Boulevard worked extremely closely with not only the community board, but the community members that reside in that vicinity to come to a resolution that their neighbors could support. I recognize the commitments that he has made to at least 45% local MWBE businesses across the project. I note, too, his commitments to enter into workforce agreements with local community-based organizations and to provide a multi-purpose community space accessible to the public on the ground floor of the project. I appreciate the attention the developer paid to my constituents and the work done to get us to this point. I look forward to holding the applicant accountable to these commitments as well. And I encourage my colleagues to vote aye on these pieces of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Rafael Salamanca.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader, for allowing me to speak on Intro 891. Across the country, professional sports teams are raising incredible sums of money for local charities through games that are completely separate from the action on the field. The game, 50-50 fan raffles. The very rare exception, however, is teams who play in New York City sporting venues who, as a result of antiquated section of the city charter, are prohibited from hosting games of chance at stadiums and arenas. For those of you that don't know, 50-50 raffles are a staple of stadium fan experiences that have been around for decades. Teams sell numbered raffle tickets before and during the game, before announcing the winning ticket near the end of the game. While 50% of the proceeds go to a winning fan, the other 50% go to a far meaningful purpose, a local charity of the team's choice. With Intro 891, we are bringing the city in line with what is already allowed at sports venues across New York State and virtually every other state in the country, all the while paving the way for sports teams to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for charities each season. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Amanda Farias.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Today I'm excited to see Intro 986A, a bill that prioritizes the efficiency of our city government being voted on, focusing on amending and repealing more than 15 non-essential task forces, advisory boards, and commissions. This bill is the beginning of our council's spring cleaning effort and is in tandem to a larger bill package with my colleagues, Councilmembers Ung, Brewer, and Williams, that focuses on removing duplicative efforts, already commonplace rules, and more that need to be repealed to ensure our administrative code and city charter are not only operating with efficiency, but just make sense. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and to my colleagues for your work and leadership on this issue. I look forward to continuing to clean up our admin code and city charter. While we're in general orders, I do want to say I'm also happy to see Resolution 460, which calls on Governor Hochul to fully fund the MTA and make 6-minute service a reality for New Yorkers citywide. Right now, our transit system is a barrier to our city meeting its full potential. 6-minute service is about streamlining our city for the benefit of our local communities and tourists alike. When our transit system fails us at it, it is a direct reflection of how our budget priorities are not meeting the needs of New Yorkers. While we wait for the state's finalized budget, we at the council are making our commitment to our public transit known by passing this resolution. I send my support to our state colleagues as they continue to fight for 6-minute service. And finally, I'd like to just say thank you to Chair Brooks Powers for your support on moving this forward.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Sean Abreu.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Today we are passing Intro 704, which would mandate that the city allow landlords to opt in to the instant electronic delivery of rental assistance payments. An e-payment system would greatly reduce the risk of late, incorrect, or undelivered checks. Sadly, we heard directly from stakeholders during the hearing on this bill that incorrect payments have led to evictions and homelessness for some families. It's long overdue that we bring our city's rental assistance payment system into the 21st century. Source of income discrimination remains absolutely rampant in our city. We're dealing with a housing crisis so extreme that even council members have trouble finding affordable apartments. Chio say. But in all seriousness, rents are skyrocketing, and it's our most vulnerable that are bearing the brunt of this crisis. If we remain with the status quo of paper checks that are subject to human error and processing delays, due in large part to the municipal workforce shortage, we are leaving tens of thousands of New Yorkers vulnerable to homelessness due to our own inefficiencies. This is unacceptable. I thank Speaker Adams, Deputy Speaker Ayala, Jeremy John, Andrea Vasquez, Jeffrey Baker, David Romero, and my colleagues for their overwhelming support of this bill, and look forward to its passage today. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Rita Joseph.
Thank you, Majority Leader. It is with honor and pride I ask you to vote favorably on the proposed bill, Intro 679A, a local law to amend the Administrative Code of the City of New York, in relation to the installation of traffic calming devices in senior pedestrian zones. This bill is about protecting seniors. It is about safety, transportation. Safety is a real issue in our community. Our constituents, primarily our seniors, have been calling for better laws to help keep them safe in the streets within their communities. This bill is doing just that. By voting yes to my bill, Intro 679A, you're contributing to keeping our seniors safe. So I want to thank my colleagues, Sia Mealy, Lewis, Ressler, Hanif, Hudson, Sanchez, Juan, Gutierrez, Brennan, Riley, Shulman, Caban, Farias, Aviles, and Narcis, who co-sponsored that bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed up to speak for general orders? Okay, we'll now move into the report of special committees. Reports of standing committees.
Report of the Committee on Consumer and Worker Protection, Intro 891A, Charitable Organizations and Games of Chance.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Finance, Preconsidered Reso 575, Transparency Resolution.
Coupled on general orders.
Preconsidered LU 192 and Reso 593 through preconsidered LU 199 and Reso 600 on page 3, property tax exemptions.
Coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on General Welfare, Intro 190A, Statement of Rights for Those Living in Shelters.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 704A, Rental Assistance Payments.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Governmental Operations, Intros 984A, 986A, and 1004A, Eliminating Outdated Programs, Advisory Boards, Task Forces, and Reporting Requirements.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Land Use, LU 181, 2546 Far Rockaway Boulevard, rezoning.
Approved with modifications and referred to the City Planning Commission pursuant to Section 197 of the New York City Charter.
LU 182 and Reso 601, 2546 Far Rockaway Boulevard, rezoning.
Coupled to be filed pursuant to letter of withdrawal.
LU 183 and Reso 602, 24506 South Conduit Avenue, commercial overlay.
Coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Public Safety. Intro 273B, Police Officer Training for Autism.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Report of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. Intro 679A and 805A, Traffic Calming Devices and Pedestrian Safety Reporting.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
Intro 854A, Daylighting Measures.
Amended and coupled on general orders.
On the General Orders Calendar, 2546 Far Rockaway Boulevard, rezoning.
Coupled on general orders, I now ask that the clerk take a roll call vote on all of the items coupled on today's general orders calendar.
Velasquez.
First, I'd like to disclose on the record, my husband is the Deputy Commissioner at DEP. My brother is a board member of Samaritans of New York. Then I'd like to ask permission to vote on all of today's coupled general orders and resolutions.
Go ahead.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Borelli.
Aye on all with the exception of Intro 854A.
Abreu.
Aye.
Ariola.
Aye on all with the exception of 854A.
Aviles.
I'd like to ask permission to vote on all matters and resolutions,
Go ahead.
and permission to explain my vote.
Also
Aye
go
on
ahead.
all, except for abstaining from 487 and a no on 273B. And I'd like to ask my colleagues to support of Intro 805A, and I would like to thank Councilmember Brooks Powers, Chair of the Transportation Committee, who's helped to move this legislation through. I, of course, want to also thank the prime sponsor, Public Advocate, for his hard work and tireless advocacy on this legislation, starting with the first iteration in 2018. While Vision Zero has helped reduce pedestrian deaths and injuries overall, we have more recently seen some alarming trends emerge in our neighborhoods. The first trend we see is a general uptick in pedestrian deaths, with 2022 marking a 24% increase in fatalities since 2018. In 22, we also tragically saw more children killed by traffic violence than in any other year since Vision Zero was implemented. We must do more to protect the lives of our children and our communities. While I believe that there are still more solutions on the table that can further enhance our efforts to improve pedestrian safety, especially from the onslaught of truck traffic in our environmental justice communities, I am proud to have co-prime sponsored Intro 805A, which will create a starting point for collaboration between DOT and our communities. And while many of us may know those interactions in our districts that are those intersections that are particularly dangerous, and even intuitively understand the cause of why those intersections might be dangerous, what we lack is clear data that will help us all make better choices for our districts. One of the most important features of Intro 805 is that it will require DOT to report to the speaker in our community boards specific information regarding crash investigation results, including factors that may have contributed to the crash, and whether changes to street design or infrastructure improvements would reduce the risk of similar crashes at similar locations. I look forward to the implementation of this bill, and thank you to all my colleagues.
Thank you. Mealy.
Can I explain my vote?
Go ahead.
I just want to say I want to vote aye on all, and I want to commend Rita Joseph on that great legislation, and my Councilmember Narcisse and Councilmember Hanks on the legislation that I am proud to be a co-sponsor of. And I vote aye on all.
Thank you. Ayala.
Oh, and happy birthday, Narcisse.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Barron.
May I be excused to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
I vote no on LU 181 and accompanying Reso 603, and I'm voting no on Intro 273B. And the reason being is because I understand that police do need training to deal with autism and other kinds of those individuals who are mentally challenged. But police been trained with a whole lot of things. And in spite of their training, they should not be the ones responding to these issues. It should be an emergency service team that has a psychiatrist, psychologist, and safety officers, and not police. And this bill will say, justify it or legitimize them responding and say they need training. You know, you could train people in the specifics of autism, but if that officer has emotional issues themselves, and if they don't have emotional intelligence, then regardless of the training, when they meet and when they get to that spot and get in that situation, it can be deadly for people who are having mental or autism issues. So I really think that it should be an emergency medical service team that responds to these cases with a psychologist, with safety officers, not police. Thank you.
Thank you. Botcher.
Aye on all.
Brennan.
Aye.
Brewer.
I vote aye. I want to thank the staff that worked so hard on figuring out which past bills, task forces, et cetera, no longer were relevant. It's a lot of work. I think it was done in the past, but not updated. So thank you very much. And if we're still talking, I don't know about land use, I do want to thank the staff for working on St. Matthews and St. Timothy's apartments, which are owned by Mother Carla and the folks at St. Matthews and St. Timothy's, and to have this in the future forever permanent affordable housing at a very low income is incredibly important to our community. Thank you very much, and I vote aye.
Thank you. Brooks Powers.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
First, I'd like to thank both Councilmember Narcisse and Hanks for their leadership on such an important bill, Intro 273. As a proud aunt of a nephew who is on the spectrum, we want to make sure that we are culturally sensitive. Just a month ago, they spoke about the increase in Black and brown communities in terms of diagnosis for autism. And so we have a responsibility as legislators to make sure that the city is responsive to this condition. I also would like to commend Councilmember Joseph and the public advocate and Councilmember Farias for their pieces of legislation coming out of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, bringing us a step closer towards safer streets. And with that, I vote aye on all.
Caban. Carr.
I'd like to disclose on the record that in the transparency resolution, CUNY is listed, and my spouse is a student at CUNY. And with that said, I'm voting no on introduction 845A and aye on the rest.
De La Rosa.
Aye.
Dinowitz.
Aye.
Farias.
I vote aye on all.
Feliz.
Permission to explain my vote.
Go ahead.
All right, first, I am present. Second, want to congratulate Council members Narcisse, Millie, and Hanks on the very important bill. I also want to congratulate Councilmember Sean Abreu for the very important housing bill. As a former housing lawyer, I litigated tons of cases, including many unnecessary cases, cases that were initiated and cases where families were unnecessarily put at risk of losing their home because HRA checks were never properly processed by the landlord, or cases where landlords alleged they didn't receive the HRA checks. So this bill will help resolve that problem, and will help resolve the problem that we have with eviction cases. So congratulations to all colleagues on all the bills. I vote aye on all. Thank you.
Thank you. Gennaro. Gutierrez.
I vote aye on all with the exceptions of Resolution 487, of which I abstain, and no on Intro 273.
Thank you. Hanif.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
I vote aye on all with the exception of Intro 273B and Reso 487, on which I vote no. Protecting New Yorkers with autism from police violence is an absolutely critical goal, but we have seen that mandated training is not a successful method in reducing the NYPD's use of force. In 2015, the NYPD launched the Crisis Intervention Team program that required all officers to be trained in managing incidences in which people are experiencing mental health crises. At that time, the approach made sense, but by all measures, this program was a failure. Over the past 8 years, the NYPD has continued to kill New Yorkers in mental health crises at alarmingly high rates. In the particularly tragic case of Kowalski Trawick, who was murdered by the NYPD in 2019, both responsible officers had received the mental health response training, and one of them had been trained just 3 days earlier. I think that is particularly illustrative that in 2019, the Court Advocate Coalition, who pushed for the training program, came to the conclusion that this program was not working and not reformable, and moved to fighting for a non-police response system to mental health crises. Ultimately, our North Star must be to build out comprehensive health-centered approaches to health conditions like autism, instead of relying on law enforcement to carry out tasks outside of their areas of expertise. In the meantime, we need to reduce unnecessary police use of force in more direct ways, including revising operating procedures in the NYPD Patrol Guide and in instituting actual accountability for officers who create harm. Thank you.
Thank you. Hanks.
I vote aye on all.
Holden.
Aye on all.
Hudson.
Aye on all.
Joseph.
Aye on all except I abstain in Resolution 487. Thank you.
Thank you. Kagan.
I would like to state for the record that my daughter is a student in CUNY College, and our transparency resolution funding CUNY colleges. I'm voting yes on all, with exception of Intro 854A, which I vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Krishnan.
Aye on all.
Lee.
Aye on all.
Lewis.
Aye on all.
Marte.
Aye.
Menon.
Aye on all.
Moya.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Narcisse.
I just want to acknowledge my Tomic. Permission to explain my vote, please.
Go ahead.
I want to acknowledge my Tomic in the balcony that dealing with children, young men, young women with autism. That's on spectrum disorder, autism spectrum disorder. But it is so sad for me as a nurse. I live my life where every new diseases we have to be trained over, we have to educate. Every new equipment, we have to educate. We are here in the City Council. When we just arrived here, we didn't know that our left hand to our right hand, and we have to be educated. The police force happen to be part of our daily lives. Yes, we don't want them to be responded to any mental disorder, but the reality of life, this is a fact. The first person that opened that run for us in our city happened to be police officers. I don't want police officers to be there for mental health at all, and coming from a nurse. So life, what I have learned is to be practical. Yes, you may not like police to do this, but guess what? The police is here, and they need to be educated on all subjects. If we have to do it over and over until we can totally transition, we have to find a way, because one life, we lose one life is too many. And the parents on the balcony that's here with me today saying that they want that. And we have people working with us here that came to me that said, thank you. They want me to push more. And that's what we are here for. We're not here to be looking good. We are here to be practical for the people of New York and to make sure City of New York is working for all of us. And police officers are part of our lives, are part of our community. I'm not representing police department. I don't want them to represent. I don't want them to run when there's mental health, because I know for a fact they do not train, even nurses. We have to keep on training to say that when you reach there, the person have a heart attack, things change, and you have to be trained about it. So for me, I am feeling kind of like uneasy to find my colleagues, because you don't like special group and you're not seeing anything. You have tunnel vision on the subject. And now I am the nurse. I've been there 30 years running and telling you I had to review every single thing to make sure it's practical. Every bill that I put in here, before I sign on it, I have to read it. So today I am very disappointed, me coming from my experience of daily activity. And I have a CM lead that can testify, and Rivera, CM, my deputy, that we have to deal and we have to be practical on a daily activity. So thank you, Majority. Thank you. I love you. Thank you. And I vote aye, of course, on all.
Thank you. Nurse.
Thank you. I stand firm on voting no on Intro 273B. I'm also voting no on Reso 487, and aye on all the rest.
Osei. Palladino.
Imagine that. I vote aye on all except for 854A. Thank you.
Thank you. Wrestler.
Aye on all.
Richardson Jordan.
Aye on all.
Riley.
I vote aye.
Rivera.
I just want to thank everyone for the well wishes and the care packages. I remain really grateful to my colleagues for their continued collaboration during my leave. And congratulations to everyone who is passing bills today. Looking forward to seeing you all in person very soon. And with that, I vote aye on all.
Thank you, Councilmember. Salamanca.
Aye on all.
Sanchez.
Permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
I vote aye on all, but I do join in my colleagues' remarks regarding Intro 273B, because for me, especially today, we had the family of Kowalski Treywick here in the council, and as my colleague has stated, just 3 days before he was murdered in his home while cooking in a supportive housing complex, 3 days before that, one of the officers who were involved in his wrongful death had been trained by the NYPD on mental health issues. And that's not it. That's one situation in my district, and just 3 weeks ago, Raul de la Cruz in my district was shot 2 times after his father called not 911, but 311. 311, because his son was in mental health distress. And within 28 seconds of trained officers arriving at the scene, he had 2 bullets in his body. And so training perhaps won't hurt the situation, and I respect and laud all efforts to keep New Yorkers safer, but we have to do better, y'all. We have to do better, and we have to make sure that beyond the training, we're continuing to fight for the things that we agree on, which is to bring mental health responders into these situations. Thank you.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Aye on all.
Thank you. Schulman.
Aye on all.
Stevens.
Aye on all. Oh, and I would like to disclose for the record that my daughter is a CUNY student.
Thank you. Ung.
Aye on all.
Vernikov.
Aye on all, with the exception of 854A. Thank you.
Thank you. Williams.
I vote aye on all, and I want to disclose for the record that I am a CUNY student. And now, can I have permission to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
Thank you. The United Nations defines good governance as having 8 major characteristics. It is participatory, consensus-oriented, accountable, transparent, responsive, effective, and efficient, equitable, and inclusive, and follows the rule of law. Today, we made progress on 2 important characteristics that define good governance: efficiency and effectiveness. Good governance means that processes and institutions produce results that meet the needs of society while making the best use of resources at their disposal. To have an effective and efficient government means to ensure that our current governing laws are accurate and up to date. Well, today we did just that. Presently, there are over 20 various provisions in which are repetitive, outdated, duplicative, and or simply outright unnecessary. As our city continues to undergo changes to best fit our community, so should the provisions we set in place. Intro 1004A will ensure that certain reporting requirements that are outdated and erroneous will be repealed and or amended to reflect our current needs. Today is really a good day for good governance. I want to thank Speaker Adams for always prioritizing what is necessary to make our government function better, and the amazing staff that spent countless hours to get this done: Malcolm, Michelle, Jesse, and Chris. Lastly, certainly but not least, I want to give a huge shout out to my sorors of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated for joining us today again at City Hall for an Advocacy Day, Delta Day at City Hall. As many of you remember, last month we passed a resolution designating March 3rd as Delta Day in New York City, and today we commemorate this recognition again by having my sorors here for Delta Day at City Hall, and we have certainly painted City Hall red. Thank you so much, Majority Leader. Ooh.
Okay. 1. Yeager.
May I be excused to explain my vote?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I just want to congratulate the sponsors of Intros 984, 986, and 1004. Anytime we can remove the unconstitutional provisions from the laws of the city is a good day. I've had my fair share of voting against unconstitutional provisions of laws that we do pass, sometimes backed up by the courts. So it's good when we clean up the charter and the administrative code a little bit. I just want to speak very briefly about Intro 854 and to differentiate it from what we are also passing today, Intro 679. I will be voting for one and not the other. You know, the council, as you know, we prepare before we vote on something a fiscal impact statement. You see this on your desk. They get put around. And on Intro 679 and Intro 854, notwithstanding that we're directing the Department of Transportation to make these installations, the impact on expenditures, I quote, "It is anticipated there will be no impact on expenditures resulting from the enactment of this legislation as DOT will utilize existing resources." So the question, of course, that I ask myself is, what won't they do in my district when this law is passed? What speed hump won't I get? What traffic signal won't I get? What broken sidewalk won't they fix? What thing that's broken in any one of our neighborhoods won't they do because they're now going to do something that we've asked them to do? I'm also a little concerned with giving them a blank check. I've suggested in the past that what might make sense is that we do a bill saying, here's a list of locations where we need to have something done. You have 60 days to do it, go do it. Because we know if we ask for a speed hump, we could wait 10 years for it and still not get it. So I'm going to vote in favor of all, aye on all, with the exception of Intro 854. Just in the last couple seconds, I just want to also say I typically vote no on bid expansions. As I read Intro 958, I just want to state for the record, it will not be expanding the expenditures, the tax that essentially businesses are paying, so I will vote in favor of that in respect to the sponsor of the bill and the council member from that neighborhood. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Powers.
I vote aye.
Speaker Adams.
Aye on all.
All items on today's general order calendar are adopted by a vote of 47 in the affirmative, 0 negative, and 0 abstentions, with the exception of Intro 854A, adopted by a vote of 40 in the affirmative, 7 negative, and 0 abstentions, and Intro 273B, adopted by a vote of 42 in the affirmative, 5 negative, and 0 abstentions, and Land Use Item 181 and Resolution 603, adopted by a vote of 46 in the affirmative, 1 negative, 1 abstention. Sorry. Oh, excuse me. 46 in the affirmative, 1 negative, 0 abstentions. Yeah. We will now move to the introduction and reading of bills.
All bills have been referred to committees as indicated on today's agenda.
Thank you. We'll now move into the discussion of resolutions. We have 2 people signed up right now. We'll first call on Councilmember Vernikov.
Thank you, Majority Leader. As a Jewish refugee whose family was impacted by the atrocities of the Holocaust, the last thing I could have ever imagined was to see these headlines in American media. New York leads the nation in anti-Semitic incidents. New York is at the epicenter of the worst American anti-Semitism outbreak in over 40 years. Anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. are at the highest level recorded since the 1970s. Unfortunately, these are not just headlines. These statements represent reality on the ground for so many Jewish New Yorkers. A disturbing nationwide trend of anti-Semitic hate crimes has engulfed our city. In 2022, there were 580 anti-Semitic hate crimes in New York, representing a 39% increase from 2021, and 3,697 anti-Semitic incidents in the United States, the highest since the Anti-Defamation League began keeping track in 1979. Things have gotten so bad that the Jewish Americans have begun to question whether their safety and future in our city is secure. And with identifiable Jews being beaten for their faith, identity, and religion in broad daylight, who can blame them? Today, I am proudly wearing my Star of David, the same star the Nazis made our grandparents wear before they sent them to concentration camps and gas chambers. I am wearing it in hopes that my fellow Jewish New Yorkers will too continue wearing and proudly displaying their symbols of Jewish identity, and I plead with them not to remove their kippot. I propose to proclaim April 29th as the day to end Jew hatred, like they did in 5 other cities, localities, and states, to send a message to all Jewish New Yorkers that this city, elected officials, and leaders of all faiths, stripes, and colors have your back, that this city will not tolerate you being harassed, vilified, or beaten in broad daylight, that we commit to taking action when your civil rights are being violated, that today, we set aside political differences and commit to working together to end Jew hatred, because we all agree that anti-Semitism is unacceptable in any society. I thank Speaker Adams, Chair Osei, and all my colleagues for the bipartisan support this resolution has received, but it's also astounding to see the council members who clearly do not want to end Jew hatred. Your anti-Semitism is showing. Thank you.
No, she didn't.
Hold on, guys. Please, we'll now go to Councilmember Palladino. And it's 1 minute for resolutions, just a reminder.
I agree with Councilmember Vernikov. The troubling rise of anti-Semitism now in our city is totally and absolutely unacceptable. As an Italian-American, I support the Jewish community and the Jewish New Yorkers who are being discriminated against and targeted for physical attacks in a disproportionate numbers. This resolution is an important step in the right direction to combat the hate that this group has endured. I thank Councilmember Vernikoff for proposing this legislation, and I too am astonished by those who disagree with this resolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Yeager.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolved that the Council of the City of New York recognizes April 29th annually as End Jew Hatred Day in the City of New York. Just a simple couple of words. Really don't understand how that's controversial. I don't understand it, and I'm not going to do what the rules of this council don't allow us to do, but I just don't comprehend, I cannot understand how that is such a difficult topic to just say yes. Now, those who say no, I appreciate that you're doing that instead of abstaining, but in this city, how could anyone deny that anti-Semitism has become a real problem? How is that possible that people are elected to this body from neighborhoods all across the city of New York and don't have a grasp of what's happening in this city, that hatred is real and it's there? And I just don't comprehend it. I'm very, very grateful to Councilwoman Vernikoff for proposing this resolution, and to Madam Speaker for bringing it to the floor today, and to all of my colleagues who stood with us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed up to speak on resolutions? Councilmember Barron.
You know, I wasn't going to say anything, but the reason why people have some concerns is because of the inconsistency of members of the Jewish community, particularly its leadership, in speaking out against hatred, like hatred of the Palestinian people, like the state of Israel murdering Palestinian women and children and stealing the land of people in Palestine. So when people hear this, they see an inconsistency in your concern of human rights. I'm going to abstain. But because they came up with these strong statements, like I can't even imagine somebody not voting like that. It's not that people are promoting hatred of Jews or wanting to be anti-Semitic. It's the inconsistency of leaders in the Jewish community. Matter of fact, leaders in the Jewish community even supported apartheid in racist South Africa and said nothing about African people dying. So it's difficult for us to get up here, and I'm not afraid to say it because of what people might think, but if we read history and if we read all of the dynamics of what's going on around race in this city, you will see people are resenting that.
Thank you,
not
Councilmember.
because, one second, because you let others go over. You'll see that when people are not anti-Semitic, they just anti the inconsistency of the Jewish community, many members of the Jewish community, and talking about human rights for everybody, not just the Jewish community.
Do we have anyone else signed up? Councilor Dinowitz.
I think Councilmember Yeager articulated it well. And it's just incorrect to say that the Jewish community does not stand with our brothers and sisters in other communities. And if you don't see that, it's because you don't want to see that. That's, of course, the collective view, not any individual in this body, because that would be against the rules. But of course, when you attribute actions of another country to Jewish New Yorkers who are facing a rise in anti-Semitism, I'm not sure what else to call it. There is no other people or other people in New York City who are facing this steep rise. You can talk after me, it's fine. But I am upset to hear that my colleagues cannot stand with the Jewish community, as we do stand with other communities. And every time we have a press conference about attacks on other communities, we stand together. And to ignore that and to say that that is the reason that you are not voting for a resolution which just simply says we should end Jew hatred is to willfully ignore the partnerships and the friendships that we have in this body and that we are trying to make. And we are working very hard to build those bridges because we all understand what hate does to us and does to our community. And that is why it is so vital that we stand together in the face of hate.
Thank you, Councilmember. We'll now go to Councilmember Hanif.
Thank you. I wasn't going to explain my vote here, but now I feel compelled to after hearing the speeches of my colleagues. I think it is extremely disrespectful to be called anti-Semitic on the floor based off of just this one action when I continue to show up for our Jewish colleagues and communities. I represent a huge Jewish community. Why I refuse to vote yes or even abstain from this resolution is because when you look a little deeper in who catalyzed which organizations, these are far right-wing organizations and right-wing Islamophobic individuals who I refuse to collaborate with. They have not stood up for Muslims. They have not stood up for trans New Yorkers or anybody. And I've not seen my colleagues step up, those who introduced this legislation, to support our trans siblings. So I find this moment, this engagement right now on the floor extremely rude and disrespectful. And I hope that we can continue to talk about this issue on a broader aspect as opposed to a simple gesture. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now go to Councilmember Kagan.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to remind my colleagues that just at a recent State Council meeting, there was a vote to have 1 day a year in public schools as a Jewish Heritage Day, and my colleague, Councilman Charles Barron, abstained from this voting for this proposal.
We don't refer to council members by name, please.
Okay.
Speak on the general issue.
So I would like to have like whole day, not 1 day a year, but whole year to be end Jew hatred in New York City. 365 days a year, not 1 day. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members signed to speak? I just want to add my support of this resolution and for the Jewish community in New York City who is under attack and in whether it's in my district or other districts is experiencing a rise in anti-Semitic attacks. And I think that the fact that we have to name one day to address this is important, but is sort of a sad state of affairs where we are in the city. But I do thank my colleagues for bringing this forward, and I think that as a city, we should not be dividing ourselves between one group or the other group. When we talk about hate, we are seeing the AAPI community and others under attack as well, and I think together should be standing together against anyone who wants to divide us. With that, I'm going to now ask that we take a voice vote on today's resolutions. If you wish to vote against or abstain from any of today's resolutions, please notify the legislative document units by email or by approaching the dais before vote. I'll now read the resolutions into the record. Resolution 460 calls on the New York State Legislature and Governor to fully fund the Metropolitan Transportation Authority in the state's upcoming fiscal year 2024 budget in an effort to ensure that public transit riders have effective, affordable public transportation. The MTA maintains fiscal stability in the face of a looming fiscal cliff, and the MTA operate more frequent bus and train service statewide. Will all those in favor please say aye? All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. Resolution 487 recognizes April 29 as End Jew Hatred Day annually in the city of New York. Will all those in favor please say aye?
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it.
Which one is that?
This is on Resolution 487, recognizing April 29th as End Jew Hatred Day annually in the city of New York.
Abstain.
Okay. The ayes have it. Resolution 566 approves the report and advisory board review commission's determination recommending waiver of 8 reporting requirements that was communicated to the City Council on January 24, 2023. Will all those in favor please say aye? All opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. We'll now move into general discussion. We will start with Councilmember Barron.
Thank you very much. My colleagues, I rise to bring to your attention the transition, the death of a good friend of mine, Alton Maddox, who was an attorney at war. Alton Maddox represented so many of us on civil rights cases and brought to the Slave Theater in Brooklyn scholars from all over the world. He was a real champion, an honest person. He never put himself first over his people. He was able to do pro bono cases, whether it was the Tarana Brawley case, who we stood with her to the end. Alton Maddox, we will miss you dearly. Secondly, I want to say to our colleagues, the mayor really disrespected us. How do you have us respond to your executive budget and you don't give us the book before you even meet with us? And then when I tried to respond to him after he disrespected us and didn't give us a book, didn't meet with us in person like other mayors do, they met in person, we had the book, we all 51 sat there for hours and asked questions. This mayor meets with us virtually, picks and chooses the people he wants to ask the questions, because they're going to ask him softball questions, says he has to leave, and when I went there to put my hand up first to ask him a question, because he didn't want to deal with the fire and the truth, he put me on mute and never allowed me to speak. Well, Mayor, I'm having my word today. That budget, you should not cut money from the agencies. There's a $4.4 billion profit that revenue that we didn't see. There's enough money to turn this into a people's budget and not a budget for those who support you on Wall Street. So the mayor's been disrespectful, and we shouldn't allow him not to allow 40 members of the council to even ask a question because he can't handle the truth.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Kagan, followed by Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. State legislature and governor are considering once again to punish New York City residents by increasing MTA mobility tax on New York City residents, to cut $500 million subsidies for a critical access ride program, and eventually MTA will increase this year tolls and fares on all riders. And also, legislature is planning other drastic measures that will eventually negatively affect millions of New Yorkers. I ride subway and buses daily and understand the importance of our affordable public transportation for everyone. I am glad that today we passed a resolution asking legislature and governor to fully fund MTA. All money must stop punishing ordinary New York City residents who pay the most of taxes, fees, fares, and tolls that actually fund MTA. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Lee, followed by Councilmember Dinowitz.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, Majority Leader, and colleagues. Earlier this week, as the Speaker mentioned, we introduced the Mental Health Roadmap, City Council's blueprint to combating our city's ongoing mental health crisis. In the blueprint are many recommendations that come from listening to community leaders, providers, and advocates, as well as my own experiences working in the field. The roadmap attempts to address the many years of government neglect and prevent clients from going through a constant revolving door, which has only gotten worse since the pandemic. This roadmap is a continuously evolving long-term strategy. It calls for adequate investments into more effective, preventive, and responsive community-based models to create better mental health outcomes for New Yorkers. The roadmap lays the foundation for many legislative recommendations and budgetary efforts in 4 key areas: prevention and supportive services, addressing the mental health workforce shortage, looking at the intersection with the criminal justice system, and increasing public awareness and interagency communication. Today, I'll be introducing the following bills. Intro 1018, requiring DOHMH and NYPD to provide the Council with an annual report on information regarding the Mayor's involuntary removal program. Intro 1019, requiring DOHMH, in consultation with H&H and OTI, to create a searchable and interactive database of outpatient mental health service providers in New York City, and also Reso 584, calling on the state legislation to pass legislative to enter the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact, Nurse Licensure Compact, and Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact to embrace or enhance the probability of medical and mental health providers to become licensed in multiple participating states. Sorry, that was a mouthful. Thank you, Speaker Adams and our office for their leadership and investment in this vision, and thank you to the folks from the Legislative Division and all the advocates and providers who continue to work and give feedback on this. I hope you will all join me in the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear from Councilmember Dinowitz, followed by Councilmember Riley.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Good afternoon, everybody. We live in a city where hundreds of languages are spoken. 15% of our DOE students are English language learners. 40% of our CUNY undergraduates speak a language other than English. A city where we strive to support all of our neighbors regardless of language. Today, I'm introducing two resolutions, importantly, first drafted by two incredible CUNY students, Ariana Pavlidis Sanchez and Isabella Grullon, that will allow our students to be as successful as possible by tangibly recognizing the rich diversity of languages spoken in our city. The two resolutions, which I hope you all sign on to, call on the DOE to implement a Seal of Biliteracy program in public high schools and on CUNY to award college credit for students who have earned the Seal of Biliteracy. So the Seal of Biliteracy is an endorsement on a high school diploma that verifies a student has fluency in English and any other world language. So this is in contrast to a typical high-stakes examination like the AP exam. To earn the seal, students must demonstrate their proficiency in English and another language through a variety of assessments, including interactive project-based assessments, unlike the AP, which is only offered in 8 languages. The Seal of Biliteracy will significantly benefit students from immigrant communities and those who speak indigenous or underrepresented languages, as it's not awarded based on that singular written test in only those 8 languages. It allows our immigrant students to utilize their native language skills and provide them with tangible benefits for those skills and for that work. And with 174 different languages spoken across CUNY campuses, it's about time we more formally and meaningfully recognize the cultural diversity of our city's college students. I urge my colleagues to sign on to these important resolutions that can move our city away from high-stakes exams and really recognize the rich diversity in our city and provide tangible benefits for students who speak any language other than English.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Riley, followed by Councilmember Ferris.
Thank you, Majority Leader, and good afternoon to my colleagues on a very festive, stated day. Today, I'm here to introduce Intro 1022, co-sponsored by myself, Councilmember Lee, Councilmember Powers, and Councilmember Rivera. This will establish a pilot program establishing community centers for individuals with severe mental health illnesses in high-needs areas. As you all may know, I'm a heavy advocate for advocating for safe spaces. And when we talk about mental health within New York City right now, it is a huge issue. And when we talk about the services we provide in New York City, I believe we do provide a lot of amazing services. But when we talk about safe space for these individuals to go, thrive, and educate themselves and receive the resources, I think it's very vital for them to get a safe space within our community. So I just ask my colleagues if you could sign on to Intro 1022 so we could get this done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Farias, followed by Councilmember Brooks Powers.
Thank you, Majority Leader. I'm excited to be introducing Intro 1012 with Councilmember Jennifer Gutierrez to develop industrial economic development action plans throughout the city. This legislation will require several of our city agencies to collaborate on a citywide industrial development action plan so that our workforce has a successful transition to the green economy, our local economies are supported, and our supply chain system is efficient and resilient. This legislation ensures we are comprehensively looking at our industrial business zones to develop a plan that enhances and protects our industrial workforce. When we protect industrial business zones and industrial jobs, we are protecting Black, Latino, and AAPI communities and the working class. The industrial workforce runs this city, and that is why I'm proud to finally be giving this issue the attention it deserves. Thank you to the council's legislative team, my staff, and Councilmember Gutierrez. I hope you all will sign on to this critical legislation.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Brooks Powers, followed by Councilmember Hanif.
I'm excited to introduce alongside Councilmember Farias Intro 1011, which would help to make available critical Fair Fares information to those in need of assistance. Every New Yorker deserves access to public transit they can afford. Fair Fares has been a lifeline to hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. This legislation will require NYPD officers patrolling in subway station to carry flyers with information about eligibility for the program, the discount offered, and the method for applying to the program. These officers would be required to give those flyers to any individual who receives a summons or is arrested for fare evasion in the subway. At a time when too many are criminalized just because they cannot pay the fare, the administration should at least be required to take proactive steps to spread more information about fair fares. I also want to take this opportunity to re-emphasize the Council's commitment to expanding the Fair Fares program, which should be eligible to millions more New Yorkers in need. I hope you all will join in signing on to this important piece of legislation and look forward to working with the administration to ensure we spread information about the Fair Fares program as widely as possible, and I thank Speaker Adams for her leadership on this issue as well. And I echo the sentiments of my soror, Councilmember Williams, with respect to recognizing Delta Day in City Hall today, and I extend special thanks to all of our colleagues that took part in today's event. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Hanif, followed by Councilmember Brewer, followed by Councilmember Holden.
Thank you. Today I'm proud to be introducing two bills. The first, Intro 1013, which is co-prime sponsored by Consumer and Worker Protection Chair Velasquez and Council members Narcisse, Ang, Marte, Aviles, Krishnan, and Lee. This bill would require DCWP to conduct robust outreach and education about fraudulent schemes committed by providers of immigration legal services. These schemes have long plagued many of our communities and have become even more prevalent over the last year as asylum seekers have arrived in our city. The second is Intro 1014, which is co-prime sponsored by Technology Chair Gutierrez and Council members Rivera, Williams, and Sanchez, and also sponsored by Council members Lewis and Marte. This bill would prohibit businesses from using biometric technology, such as facial recognition scans, to identify or verify a customer. The recent events at Madison Square Garden are a high-profile example of the inevitable civil liberty violations that occur when our governments allow private businesses to use these tools. But my reasons for introducing this bill are broader in scope. I have concerns about a retail store refusing entry to a shopper due to a false facial recognition match, which we know occurs more frequently to darker-skinned women, trans people, and young people. I'm also disturbed by companies potentially collecting and selling biometric data to advertisers and other third-party entities, which constitutes a serious privacy violation. As a Muslim New Yorker who grew up in the post-9/11 era, I'm all too familiar with the impacts of excessive surveillance. This is an anti-discrimination and civil liberties issue that our body has a responsibility to take on. I encourage you to sign on to both bills as a sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Brewer, followed by Councilmember Holden.
Thank you very much. Intro 1010 would change the code to add a 311 complaint category for unlicensed cannabis retailers. I think you may know there's no formal process for 311 complaints about unlicensed cannabis retailers, and people are calling. What happens when you call 311 is that the operators do not know how to triage the complaint. I have called to report illegal cannabis. Most often, I'm referred to a state office of cannabis management email address. You know people aren't going to use it consistently. Once I was told to call back and make a complaint about illegal cigarettes instead. I think we're all trying to find a way to enforce illegal cannabis shops, but in the meantime, we at least make to have reporting efficient. Keeping multiple lists of illegal store silos from the different agencies that need to be working together does not make sense. And also, there's no way for the public to know if their complaints have been received or heard or followed up on. There's no transparency. And you may know people are upset about the shops. Number two, Intro 1009 would would change the code so that the double-decker sightseeing buses have at least one employee present on the upper level at all times when passengers are present. Obviously, this is good for safety, it's good for information for the passengers, and over the years, I know that the tour bus operators do like to have a pre-recorded audio rather than a live person. I believe very strongly that the guide's job is to ensure passenger safety and to give good information to our wonderful tourists. Also, it helps with language barriers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Councilmember Holden.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Today I'm introducing Intro 1015, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill, which would permit the Commissioner of Buildings to commence proceedings to seal, secure, and close a property where $25,000 or more is owed in unpaid fines and the property appears to be vacant. All too often, absentee landlords and nameless developers abandon property to the detriment of our neighborhoods. These zombie properties become an eyesore and are often infested with rats and other vermin. As a council, we should always stay focused on quality of life issues that benefit our constituents and all New Yorkers. This has been a problem for some years where the property is abandoned, sometimes for decades. And so this bill, again, it's Intro 1015, will go a long way to try to solve that. Thank you, Majority Leader, and I urge my colleagues to support 1015. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else signed up to speak? Seeing none, I'll now call on Speaker Adrian Adams to close today's stated meeting.
Thank you, Majority Leader. The stated meeting of April 27th, 2023 is hereby adjourned.